only one thing I can say that everybody can expecting if they go in the war, they're going to come back damaged somehow. There's no long-term solution or so research to say how people should behave when they come out of the war or whatever it is. And most of the people who come back out of the war, they come back damaged somehow.
To waste any second of this priceless conversation. It hasn't
I just love the background, man. I love your background.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I've been watching some of your YouTube videos, and I was going to compliment your background. You seem to have built a kind of a studio, or was it?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, that's correct. A reason for this is very simple. Like, you know, I mean, like you and I just talking right now.
Yeah.
You want to create, you want to leave a legacy, and I like it that you are stepping out comfort zone, and people want to create something more. So yeah, I created my own studio, and you know, have my guests and renting the studio. So it's
living a trace in this digital world, right? I feel often it's almost a shame how people mindlessly use technology, the internet, that is, without producing content, right? I think we've got no rights not to produce content, right?
Yeah. Look, I'm grateful that I talked to somebody from your country, you know what I mean, because it reminds me so much, you know, when I was very kid, you know what I mean, like I was in the war, like I was 18 years old, and then, you know, seeing the Ukraine now and all these things, I said, like, man, it's just the same thing with Yugoslavia 91, same thing. But, you know, so thank you for having me.
I am admittedly excited to know your story, and I'm excited to have the conversation, but I would for sure like to start by talking about matters aren't very exciting, and that is war, obviously, right?
Okay,
from what I've read about you and what I've seen on your videos, you've been exposed to war quite early in life, right? So you were what, 18? And we are talking about the Yugoslavian disintegration, right?
That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So, you know what I would like to ask you? So I want to really get into your individual experience of feelings of being exposed to war, but also historically, because I'm not too educated on what literally happened to this. It's almost, it was a kingdom, I know, at one point, right? Yugoslavia was considered probably historically
after First World War Yugoslavia was being was an interesting country. Like, you know, I mean, like it seemed like with a Russian, or you have a 29th or 28th republic, you know, the different nationalities, everything else. But Yugoslavia was a mixture of the very volatile backgrounds. You know, I mean, one side you have the Croatians who they belong naturally to the history to Austro-Hungarian monarchy, right? So they fought, you know, Turks, they fought everybody from on the east. So there's always clashes, not between just the east and west, but between the cultures. You know, I mean, everything from east was considered like, you know, oh, it's bad. You know, I mean, everything's
different worlds, right?
Yeah, different world. You know, and then after First World War, like, you know, when the Austro-Hungarian monarchy disintegrated, as we all know, Croatia and Slovenia become the part of Bosnia of Kingdom Yugoslavia. Then, you know, it became the Yugoslavia itself. But then again, you know, there come the Second World War. Guess what's happened then? Croatia joined the Axis forces, right? Declared independence. And they, I mean, joined the Germans in fighting. And I mean, again, you know, everything on the east and everything else. So comes 1945, which is a year of reprisal. Tito comes on the power, and communist. Tito was a good friend with Stalin, but they fall apart because Stalin wanted to put him
the president, right? You're talking about that.
Yeah. And then 1945 comes, and then comes the total abomination of the cultures. You know, I mean, there's literally you have the one side Slovenians, they're speaking, you know, totally different language. You have Croatians, different Roman Catholics, different language and culture, religion. You have the Bosnians with the Muslims, and then the mixture between all this population. You have the Serbs, then, you know, who are the Orthodox, different religion, different type of Orthodox than Montenegro and the what's it called, Macedonians. So imagine living in 6 republics. Everybody has a different agenda, but somehow the communists created that artificial state called Yugoslavia. And my father was a big believer. Like, my father was a typical communist product, you know, long live the Stalin, Marx and Engels and all these things. They believed in this. They believed in that brotherhood and unity. But under the surface was a nationalism was brewing badly, through the years. And I remember in the 80s when I was, unfortunately, my parents decided, my story started quite early. Like, I was a very troubled student. I was troubled boy. And, I loved the drinks. I loved to explore the things. And my parents actually kicked me out at age 14. And my grandfather took me under his wing. And he says to me, "You're going to become the soldier." So like, man, I can't even finish in primary school, not soldier. And and then in communism, you will go in a military school at age 14. When you finish the primary school, you go in military school. So my grandfather used his influence to put me in military school. And guess what, Bogdan? You start liking, you start believing, the communism, the brotherhood, the unity, and you find yourself. And then,
especially at that age, right? A rather pliable age, right? Everybody has some kind of influence over you.
Yeah. And then 91 comes. I knew that something's happening, some type of nationalist, movements, and in Serbia, in Croatia.
And by nationalism, you mean those republics, so to speak, they were growing more and more independent and wanting to live the union, right?
Yeah, well, Croatia was the one who was leading that. But again, now let's go back in 1945. Let's go settle the scores, right? That was it. That was the war about. And I do remember, that my friends who were my friends till yesterday become my biggest enemy. So like, the war started 91, full-fledged war. The military stood up, to protect the borders. And I was a part of that military. However, I didn't want to fight anymore for that country, for the Yugoslavia, because I saw that military I was serving, I was loving, start destroying everything what I love. My school, my neighborhood. They have the planes, they have the tanks. They have everything. They're just destroying everything because they can. And I become the one-sided together with the militia, the Serbian militia, one side. They try to.
And you being what, 18 at that point?
Yeah, that I was 18. Like, I never forget, like 14th of July, 91. I was just 18 and something. And, I wake up in the morning, Bogdan, like, I was just like drunk night before because my girlfriend left me, broken my heart. And then my life, my world was crushing, And in the morning, I wake up and I open the door. Somebody's knocking, not violently. And I open the door. There's a military police. Comrade Bekes, report emergency in army barracks. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? I said, I'll come in a couple hours. No, right now. And I said, look, I need to dress myself. And I found myself, as I was walking downstairs, I saw the friends, one side like Serbs, one Croatian. Nobody loves nobody. And like I'm going in the middle, and they told me, who are you going to join now? And that very moment, I already knew it. So that something was terrible happening. And that night, I witnessed a very brutal shelling from the Federal Army of my city, and killing hundreds of civilians. With the praying in the street, literally praying, yes, in Croatia, yes. And that I decided this is the moment I need to fight for my country, regardless of everything. Yeah, that's how I started.
That was a wake-up call, right? That's a wake-up call in a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so, speaking a little bit about the psychology of this wake-up call, you were obviously a little bit prepared as far as I can judge, because your grandpa had instilled certain values in you, right? So at least you knew what was happening. At that point, did it ever cross your mind, and it may come down to war, to legit battle, a serious altercation, military fights? Did you ever imagine yourself at that point taking part in something so brutal and dangerous?
No, never. Like, even I was going military school, I was going in the Navy. I was supposed to be submariner, captain of submarine, or the least officer of submarine at the beginning. But what I didn't witness it's actually people cannot understand that when people watching the war on TV, it's a one thing, but when you're witnessing in reality, it's totally different. I would never ever believe that what I saw and I felt it's possible, that sheer destruction, that I can't. When I have my son is 20 years old. I don't like to talk to him about war, but I said to him sometimes, Matteo, I remember some summer nights, we were sitting, because we were like a kids from the, how to say, not kids from the block. Like we have been organized like a battle groups, from the streets, the first weapons,
like
I was in,
gangs or something?
yeah, like, like it's more like a band of brothers, literally. But even I was in the special forces or Ministry of Interior at that stage. It was a lot of groups in the suburbs, getting the weapons and name of the units and in all these things.
Forming some kind of organizations.
That's
right?
correct. It was taken very, very fast pace. But two things actually should surprise me. Number one, it's people who always talk about war like they were not there. Like my father. My father dumped me. My father, that morning when the military police on the door, I was looking for my parents, and my parents just go night before. They just fled, just dumped me. They left me alone.
Didn't tell you nothing?
Wow. Nothing. I'll just come home drunk. They pick up the suitcases, obviously, and they just left during the night. They left me a message, we okay. So my father was that one who was always told me, when the war comes, you need to be the man, this and that. But secondly, when I saw what shelling can do, like, destroying, that one shell mortar, 82 millimeters or 120 on the multiple rocket launches at that stage, when you hit it, I often say like it's like a Christmas tree. You see in the distance at sunset, all these lights, and then you can hear and but because of proximity of the front line, you can see this because our enemies was usually about 2 kilometers of the city. So like they're occupying a lot of territories, and we were losing the war. Like, I was going from the summer into the autumn in still summer uniform. It comes the summer, autumn, winter. I'm still in the summer uniform. I get pneumonia second time. Like it was a terrifying experience, I must say. And the war is a hell. Is a hell.
Oh yeah, indeed. Undoubtedly, I think even my chair is breaking as you're talking about that. So when you were going through that school, it seemed to you rather like perhaps just a stage of your life. You were never seeing yourself in the future as a soldier, taking serious part in something like that. It was just something that was the only option. Did you ever, at that point, at that stage of your life, did you ever want to be somebody else, something else, not to serve?
Yes.
Do something else?
Yes,
yeah, you did.
Yes, I tell you, Bogdan, I'll be frank with now. I can do BS stories and tell the people how brave I was, how courageous I was. But one thing, and that's what I wrote in my books, emotions that I'm going to die the virgin, number one, that was the biggest problem. Secondly, I was more afraid in my life, Bogdan, than the fear is real. And to be frank with you, like when I think now how I could go to that fear daily basis, I just need to convince myself it's going to be better. I need to do daydreaming. And
so almost bullshit yourself.
I give you just one positive. Quick story. 15th of January. Yeah. That's correct. Yeah, that's. I remember 15th of January 1992. Croatia got independence, world recognized, recognition, and the Federal Army was shelling, badly, and it was a bad fight. And I do remember I saw on a TV commercial in a bunker day, like a shipping container was being digged into the soil. I saw commercial, the girls dancing in a bikini with the McDonald's in Ibiza, and somehow there was a big on the sky was a big, hot air behind a jet plane, some passenger jet plane. And I told the guys, one day I'm going to be on that plane. I just want to go in Ibiza because I want to go away. I really want to go away. I couldn't handle it anymore because 7 months in the war, it was killing me. Like literally, I was 19 years old. I was already alcoholic. I didn't know what's the day, what's the night. I don't remember properly sleeping. I don't know where my parents they are. Friends, my only friends was my MG34 at that stage, my machine gun. People were dying on daily basis. You're forgetting the names, and you're talking to yourself, and then you just want to be somewhere else with somebody else. You don't want to be there.
But
then you put yourself back together, and that's it.
Right, before the battle broke off, did you ever consider yourself a patriot? What was your patriotic attitude towards the country?
Well, I believe, look, I didn't know what the patriotism forbidden, it was forbidden, Bogdan. It was forbidden. Forbidden Yugoslavia was nationalism was forbidden, church was forbidden.
Because that was
you
possibly a
can't go to
threat to the
church.
unity.
Poor, they will cut you off straight away. Like, you know, I mean, that was not acceptable. Even I was, as a kid, I was altar boy. You know, when you primary school, nobody cares, but you becoming older,
Right.
that is a really, really problem. And of course, you know, like if you have the party membership book, you know what I mean, you can progress in career. Yeah. My father, who is not educated person, he was a union president of the unions, but because he was good communist, he didn't know how to write, you know what I mean, but I can't believe it is. So yeah, that was unbelievable, that the communism. But the thing is, no, I was never consider myself the big nationalist or nothing. But that moment, I remember 14th of July 1991, that evening, I witnessed that night the sheer destruction of the human life. And what actually brought me to the speed to make my decision to defend my country was that once when the shelling started and people being injured on the street, ambulance will come
Oh, I'm
and fire
sorry.
brigades. What will do then? They will
I
do
think
again shelling, you
we've
know what I
had a
mean, during
brief
the emergency pick it
interruption.
up. And was like, I said, that's yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, yes.
Yeah, because I think I lost you for a couple of seconds. So could you please go
Okay.
back? You
No,
said I lost you after what you said once the shilling
okay, sorry,
started.
apologies. So like what actually brought me, you know, to my anger and my decision making to I will defend to my last drop, it was that when I saw that night, 14th of July 1991, enemy, well, that day the Federal Army becomes my biggest enemy. Shelled my city, and the women on the street who prayed being injured so badly. Shelling stopped, then suddenly, you know, come emergency, the ambulance and the fire brigades come on a scene to pick up the dead, wounded, help everybody else, and I was amongst them. Suddenly, shelling started again, and I said to myself, "Ah, man, this is brutal. This is terrorism." You know what I mean? This is like, and when you think yourself, you know, that some people are sitting behind the cannons and the missiles and multiple
Making
rocket launches.
decisions.
Yeah, and they just with a smile on their face, destroying everything what I love, what is dear to me. Well, you got
Then
you
it's
got
not
what you
an
want. Yeah.
option.
Yes, that's
So
correct.
how long did that active phase last? When, since the beginning till the end, how long did that last?
The war in Croatia started till the 96, officially finished in 96, sometimes was called status quo. The last operation in Croatia was in August 95. So it's almost 5 years was a constant combat. But what was the worst, what we got it, it's even worse. So 92, I'll lie to you now, Bohdan, March, April, May, the UN forces start coming in Croatia, so like a tampon zone, which was even worse because UN does nothing. It's actually it's good because it's like a standby status quo, uh, which we used to arm ourselves. But then there comes the game of the cat and mouse, a lot of spying. So what will do? The UN will transport, you know, their officials in uniforms of UN in Croatian territory to see what we're doing, and vice versa. It was a lot of silent war, which means it was a lot of. I can say this way.
Yeah,
So
I
let's
know
just
what you're
say,
talking about.
yeah. So between us and enemy was a UN, but just on a control
Yeah,
point.
so you couldn't go full in, right? Because at the same time you probably had to save some sort of civilized face, so to speak. Yeah, we've had similar situation in 2015, 2014 when Russia occupied those certain regions, and then surely there was international intervention, and yeah, it was like almost investigation of a kind. So they had to, well, they didn't really pay, they've never paid much attention to whatever the publicity must say about them. Yeah, but we were sort of limited because it was still our territories. And you know, it's if the aggressor occupies your flat and it sits in your flat, and then for you to remove the aggressor, to chase the usurper away, you probably sometimes need to shield that flat. But once you shield your own flat, well, then the international spectators might have certain questions to you. So it's by default a tricky position to find yourself in.
Yeah, look, that's just like, people don't understand one thing. I can compare this. He said Ukraine has something what I saw in Croatia. Why we were losing the war, like, we knew we were gonna lose. We lost 91 in end of November, mid-November. We lost one of the cities we call the Croatian Stalingrad. It's called the place Vukovar, where the enemy was surrounding, 3,000 soldiers, defending the hospital and civilians, and eventually collapsed after 3 months of defense. You couldn't do any more nothing to help these people. I know one thing, that you can't break the cohesive units. What that means, when you have the soldiers from the same city, same suburb, or whatever entire units from your region, they know each other. They're fighting much more fearsome. They're more of better opponent than, let's just say, Russians in this stage. Russians have the throwing the units, from interior, combining everything else. These people are together, but they're not together. But when you're defending your country, that's in our case. And I do remember when we had that UN thing, coming in, what's it called, in March, April, or May. As again, I've not lied to you. I need to check again. It was 30 years ago. The war started in Bosnia in May, right? So neighboring country started war. And Croatia was again thrown off the balance. Now entire southern border, was being compromised because the enemies was connecting from Bosnia now in Croatia, in our territory. So it was continuous fighting for 5 years. We had that status quo, no shelling of the cities anymore, but on the front line was a constant vigilance, constant shooting, and constant, crossing the enemy and try to do some
What was the UN's
operations.
participation in those conflicts? Did they
Sorry?
just observe, make notes?
Nothing.
Did
They were just making
suffice?
money. Nothing. Nothing. I
Like-
think the UN was just was a good example to buy the 92. Croatia was started getting lifting sanctions, because we had the sanctions from the Western society, because we separate ourselves from Yugoslavia, and then we start getting the armament from the Western society, Western countries. And UN was that one who was actually, it was there. I can't blame them, but if it's not for them, we'll have the war, which eventually we'll lose. But like, you never know who they're playing for. Like, again, you have the UN forces from some country in Africa we had in our region. They didn't even speak English. For them it was more like different approach to Croatians than to the Serbs, and we knew this. Them. So UN role, I don't think I don't think that's a good idea. I think that things need to be settled down to the end, and then what's happened, because 95, when we have the UN, but what the Federal Army and then Serbs, who occupied the bar stage, 1/3 of our country, they shelled for first time capital city, very first time, middle of the day, multiple rocket launches. It was just like was a terrorist attack. And the UN knew it. He saw what they're doing and preparing and everything else, but done nothing. So. I don't believe UN.
Why do you think, if you now go back to that? So first of all, during those 5 years, describe the civilian life. There were still people, I imagine, right? What was it like for them?
You can see in Ukraine this very well, actually. People try to live their daily life like nothing happening.
Yeah.
But
we've got a cost the majority of ours.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I have a goosebumps when 93 I saw for very first time kids in school. During the war, like many civilians, they disappeared. I know my city, from 100,000 people, suddenly has been defended by the 2,000 soldiers. I know where the people they are. I remember they shut down the borders outside of my city. People can't flee anymore. So during the war, people help everybody in the basements, and people tried to assist the wounded. It was this camaraderie. It was that help each other. And I remember, the women will, clean, after the shelling, people come out, clean the glass, the debris. It was
Yeah,
unusual feeling.
yeah.
But then
Cooperation, right?
yeah,
Strangely,
exactly.
sorrow
That
unites.
when I saw, when I see, I remember for the days when I was, because there was never a solid front line. My city was being occupied. 90% was being surrounded. Only one road was leading out. Um, that was a front line. So living in the city was a front line and constant shelling. But I remember from 93 to 95, when you have the thousands of civilians and the life is again blooming and growing back in city. But Bogdan, that 2 kilometers away, it's all these howitzers, multiple rocket launchers, you know what I mean? The heavy artillery, everything else. You think yourself, Jesus, is our new life? Like
Hmm.
where they can shell whenever they want, they're gonna kill the thousands of people. So
Hmm.
people are trying to live normal life, but they were afraid. They were afraid. They knew it
Hmm.
as,
Hmm.
and somehow they pretended like never was gonna happen, and it did happen. 95.
Did you notice during that period the special, again, union of people? Did the nation become stronger anyhow during that period, or was there still a little bit of break in the society? You think?
I think nobody can conquer the spirit of
Yeah,
society. There's no way. Look,
hmm,
I know we made it fun, I mean, from people in capital city because they didn't know what the war was, and
hmm,
other places. But it cannot entire country be in a war equally same time. I mean, there's no possible, right? But one thing I know that solidarity was booming. One thing, poof, I mean,
hmm,
one thing what did bother me was a black market start booming, and there was a lot of these gangs and all these things.
hmm.
And during the war, police cannot do police work. They're working under such a different circumstances.
Right, right.
And that stage, I was working in military security apparatus, security intelligence apparatus, and I remember that the government couldn't tolerate, the betrayal. Number
Hmm.
one, it's a
Hmm.
lot of people who betrayed. There was so many. Look, I just give you the
Betrayal, you
imagine
mean
this.
like separatism, right? Working
Yeah,
for
like
the
I mean, there
enemy,
was
right?
still
Leaking the
elements in the
information.
city. So you know, when my city is like in Ukraine, it's a flat fields, and it's all the corns, it's all the
Yeah,
sunflowers, it's all the wheat.
right.
An enemy village, first enemy village is 2 kilometers, and how you can, they have the maps, they have all these things. But what they did, they will go on rooftops and they will do the flashlights in the dark. I
Mm.
mean, can you imagine it?
Ah,
It's just orientations. I mean, like
mhm,
then they will
mhm,
go in Hungary, from Croatia in Hungary, to meet with the people from enemies, to meet in Hungary and other places in Bulgaria. And I mean, so like we
mhm,
follow all these people who were like supposed to defend the country, they were
mhm,
betraying country for the money. I'm like, are you
mhm,
serious? And
mhm, mhm,
but people, solidarity was together.
mhm,
I must say that is something nobody can conquer. There's no weapon can conquer national pride at all.
mhm.
There's no army done this in the past.
I would like to ask you one thing that I've been thinking a lot lately about. Do you think, how would you answer the question whether everybody talking about men should serve? Like, I know it's a provocative question, it's a bit of a thin ice question, but in a condition like that, particularly in that period, did you ever face with males that refused to, perhaps, if not serving, then even directly suffice the the proper side, and they had a rather, there are always those people, and I must admittedly confess I do criticize them, although I am in no position, because for certain reasons I am not currently serving, and I've been
Yeah.
struggling with this just morally, because there are people who don't serve, and they consider themselves pussies, directly speaking, and there are people who do not serve and they think they are right, and they believe that they would
I'll
not be
be
able to
very frank
change
with you.
anything.
I tell you something. I'll be rude now. It's a bullshit. I'll tell you something what it is. Uh, when the war started in Croatia, and as I said, like I do remember clearly now, all these alpha males, all these
Hmm.
strong men,
Hmm.
including my father, the first one who ran away. run. That's number one. Secondly, we are not all meant to carry the weapon. What I appreciate in during the war, I say people have their right to beliefs, and people have the right to contribute in their way they want to contribute. I always ignore the fact that in my unit, in one stage, I have a people who are the 50, like me now, or 60 plus years old men in my unit, because the attrition rate was so high, like a First World War. Like we lost everything. I was wounded 3 times, and every time I was wounded, part of my life was gone. But then I realized that people who stayed behind us, they can contribute different way. Psychological warfare, electronic warfare. They can do crypto analysis. They can do, when I say crypto, not the banking, but the crypting and messages, right? So electronic warfare. You can do in a factory. Somebody needs to make the bread. Somebody needs to do these things. You know what I mean? So nobody can, like I said, like Bogdan. Please apologize for this one. When somebody says to me, "You should get a weapon," well, why don't you get a weapon? When somebody says somebody else, "You should get a weapon," I know people can be disappointed. I know that people can say, this person should do this or that person should do that. But we are not all meant to be carrying the weapon. And I'm telling you right now, Bogdan, why I send this to you? War changed the man. No question asked. Once when the war is finished, all these medals and everything else is going to be memory. But you rather have somebody next to you in the trenches who is going to carry the weapon. I have in my example, I have people who are, after the combat started, I couldn't find them anymore because they were afraid, they're gone. And I could understand this. I could be angry, but I need to understand that we are not all meant to be
At that point, did you low-key criticize them, you think, honestly?
No. Why should I? Why should I? He said, why should I? My biggest critique was my father, because my father was the biggest, for me, disappointment. But then I realized one thing, the war is not for everybody, right? And we contribute to war differently.
How have you ever, if ever, been able to understand whether the person is able to carry the weapon, so to speak, and to take active part in the battle? Is there even a way to predict it in peaceful time, you think?
No.
So.
I spent quite a long time in the military. I said to my son, when you see these commercials, people carrying all this latest gear, when you see, they're looking sharp and dangerous, everything else. One thing, what you don't see it on every image, is what is going to the head of every soldier, right? And I know that every soldier there on the front line lives different feelings. I don't think nobody has the right to critique nobody. I think it's the biggest, because after all, one thing what I try to say, what I learned in military, when the moment comes that you need to defend something what you love most, your home, your family, your wife, your kids, average Joe is going to turn into the animal. So leave people alone. The war is a war. Ukrainian war, it's a bloody war, and I can see it's reminiscence of what I'm seeing. But it cannot be every single man on a front line. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work that way. No.
And the only way to know whether you qualify, whether you're capable of that, is just to make one choice, right? Just to accept, to take that step, and then maybe all of a sudden the work condition will help you to reveal certain traits of your character of which you've never even been aware of, perhaps in peaceful time. Or maybe there's also a probability, the sad and unfortunate probability, that can break you, and then pray to God that you survive. Right? Would you say that stepping in the war, you must be ready psychologically to lose your life?
I think that anytime when you're getting weapon in your hands, you should be psychologically evaluated by the independent people, and that's what we did. Look, my war was a little bit different. We fought for the independence. It was a civil war. It was a war against aggression, against the third most powerful military in Europe then. and it was a different. We didn't have the military, right? We didn't have the, how to say, armed forces. So we start building, all these things. But a year later, I do remember when my first contract came in April '92. I remember professional contract, literally professional contract. I need to go medical commission, right? And I know that a lot of men has been deemed unfit for the service for many reasons. And look, and it's like, if somebody can't go in a war, it should not be forced, because if you send somebody in a war who is not prepared to go in a war, you're gonna have that one big problem, and that person may not come back home.
Might be a
maybe
trouble.
not contribute to war in a way you wanted to contribute. So like, and being the cannon fodder, it's not a solution. I saw this in my war. We have the more cohesive units, and we are more effective than the large units with the reserve army. As I said, we have reserve army then later on, and this reserve army was having the more casualties 2 lines behind us because they're not prepared to go into combat, because that's what it is. So like, no, you can't critique nobody. I think the independent body needs that one who's going to judge somebody's ready to carry the weapon or not, because after all, once when you get your assault rifle in your hands, you are deciding about life and death, and that is big deal. So people believe that being soldiers just carrying the weapon and the posing. No, I always been afraid
the
of
unrealistic standards, right? It's like it's been overly romanticized, I believe.
Look, I was always pissed off, and I'll be honest with you, I was always pissed off. I would come home, I was on trainings and everything else, so you're like front line or you're training, and I will see at that stage still, I'll have some equipment, and then I see some guy in the city, like, belongs to something somewhere, has such a beautiful, polished equipment, it's like, where's this come from? Like all this gear, that's fancy stuff. Oh, I can't tell you. I'm on the front line struggling with a AK-74, but you have a Heckler and Koch. How is that even possible? Like, and I said to myself, so these people are at the back, in the background, and the people, behind our lines have been better equipped than me on front line. So nobody can judge nobody, particularly you or nobody else. You want to go in a war,
Did you ever somehow consolidate, like, did you find peace with the fact that you being on a front line is not equipped as well as you should be compared to those who
never,
that are?
No.
You've never found peace with that.
Yeah,
right?
for the years was gruntling. I understand one thing when 94, I would say 94, we start getting the first uniforms that be uniformed, like, like the unit by unit and insignia and infantry from the Air Force, different uniforms. And at that stage, I never understood why the frontline soldiers have the shitty equipment and people, behind our back, and in logistics, like the guy. I remember this guy was a major, and I remember coming into this big logistic, the army barracks, and say, like, my soldiers have not this and this and this. So I'm seeking, who's in charge? And he was complaining how he needs to change 1 socks daily, not twice per day, because his feet are so, what's it calling? What he's called? How he called it? His feet, very gentle feet. I was like, Mike, we don't even have the, the proper. So that's how it is. In a war. So I never understood. 95, when the war was over, and when the army was being, a lot of people demobilized, from 250,000 people to 100,000 people, then from 100 to 60,000, and only professional corps stayed, and the regular army. Then we realized that, we have the now better equipment. But that stage, no, I could never understand. No.
How do you evaluate certain people's criticism of the United States in this Yugoslavian war? Because the states get blamed for shelling a country. If we listen to this unfortunate and ridiculous Russian narratives, the states are to be blamed for nearly every sorrow that have that have happened on the face of the earth. So what was Americans' intervention in that situation? Like the States, NATO, how do you reminisce about that?
Look, I must say, like, I was a kid then. I mean, I could understand politics very well. United States was the enemy of communism. It was not like a living enemy of Yugoslavia, but it was not. We never welcomed them, and they never looked them beneficially. One thing I do remember, that as a kid I always want to go in America, right? Because sometimes somebody will smuggle some magazines from the West, bring to us, and we're like, wow, look at these people, they have Nike sneakers and all these things. I don't remember 91, and I don't think so that every war on a planet Earth was being caused by the United States. That I think the people giving them far too much credit. I think that's a rubbish. Ukraine was part of the Russia. Russia invaded independent state. That's a totally different. So that has nothing to do with Americans. It's not Americans coming Russia, so like Russia defend themselves.
Absolutely, yeah. Invading, breaking the international agreements that they had agreed to in the first place. So
it doesn't make a sense, mate. Then secondly, the Russians was using this what's it called, Wagner Group, which is like, when you're using mercenaries in a theater of the war against regular army. We have something similar in Croatia as well. We have the paramilitary units from Serbia in our region operating. This is something where the government says, oh, we don't know what they're doing there. Well, so then you ask yourself, why would they fight a war except you can wash your hands, right? So I don't think that US, as a kid, I don't remember, because one thing I do remember, they have the first Desert Gulf War, whatever it's called, Desert Shield, when they kicked out Iraqis from the Kuwait. Then Americans was there. I remember, that was their war before our war, and it was the first war I saw on TV, and I couldn't believe that our war was going to be next one. But I don't believe that Americans started all these wars across the globe. Did they help it somehow, somewhere? Most probably they did. I think Afghanistan, they helped to fight with Mujahideen against Russians, but then they become the victim of their own success, over there. Iraq, I think the Iraqi people wanted what I remember. But again, I think that Ukrainians are grateful for the help of the United States, because they're giant.
Yeah.
They're giant.
They have been arguably the most helpful to us, for sure.
At least Putin doesn't go in South Korea, most isolated country on the planet, and asking for the weapons, man. That doesn't make sense. So I think that US is a world police officer, which it is. That is true. And if it's not for US, I think we'll have a lot of tyrannies across the globe rising. And
because whether you like it or not, whether you agree with some of the, they have their own tumultuous, let's say, conditions and situation. And I think this fight between the left and the right in the States is very prominent and obvious, because I'm pretty deep in this American informational sphere. I love listening to lots of podcasts, but that's good. But I think even this battle between two parties also is a sign of a democracy, and that's what the States have been predominantly always standing for. And back when the USSR was almost, it's like I've listened to this video today. I love watching these videos, how Ukrainian bloggers go on this chat roulette services, video chat roulette services, and they just mess with the Russians. But by messing, it's not like they just, humiliate them directly. They literally want to hear how they could logically explain what their country has been doing, and they fail miserably, horribly. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, Bohdan. You see, you answer right now why not everybody should carry the weapon. Yeah. The most powerful weapon, it is the brain. You see, I just love what you say right now. That's what you should. That's your podcast. It is about. You see, because everybody there now in Russia, whatever, one day when they're looking this, say like what the Bohdan has on this one. That's how this psychological warfare is working, right? And you are absolutely right. These bloggers, and I say like I saw some things. I'm sorry to interrupt you. That's the answer why not everybody should carry the weapon, because
but the problem is that, to me, it doesn't serve a good excuse not to carry the weapon, and I'm struggling greatly innerly inside. But I do somehow reconcile with that fact. But But that's all right. That's all right. Would you say that the war, I was going to ask you, do you think the war amplifies the already existent qualities of individuals?
That's
Isn't it
correct.
like
Yes,
money,
that's correct.
in some regard? Like if a bad person becomes rich, well, it ain't going nowhere good. But if a resilient and disciplined person becomes rich, he multiplies it and uses it for good.
I'm grateful for the war. I am grateful for the war because it's hard to somebody sell me anything, what is possible, what is not possible. I think that the humans itself don't understand how resilient as a humans we are. We can absorb so much, negative. I remember, one thing in the war I always said is, doesn't matter how much summer and sunny and green leaves around are, it was always gray. Always gray. I can't explain to people. It's always gray. When it was raining, it's gray. When it's snowing, it's gray. But all these weather seasons and everything else, human can withstand. Equipment, it's something what cannot withstand. Equipment, it's more sensitive and more prone to malfunction and fail than the human. I'm grateful for the war because I realized that I can do more things than I was being told I will be able to achieve. Doesn't say like it doesn't matter when you're in the front line. You still have your buddies in the trenches, and in the war is not 24/7 just shooting, but you sharing the daily bread, the jokes, and everything else. Like I remember while in trenches, I learned more about human emotions than ever in my life. The fears. So like I was more afraid in the war than being anything else. But then I learned how to control the fear, which I try to pass on other people. I'm telling them, you don't need to look so far to somebody help you. Look inside of yourself. Everything is inside of us, and the war is going to amplify you. Look, it's going to make some people bad as well. Some people are going to believe that in a war they're going to do and achieve so much. As a black market, as a prostitution, the drugs was, in Croatia was I was like on daily basis. We have the car bombs. I never saw the car bomb in my life till I didn't go for coffee during the day. And I mean, with my friends, and suddenly some criminal sits there and it's gone off. But as I said, like war, he makes people more determined. Some people gonna lose their nerves as well. Some people's gonna be psychologically damaged, no question asked. I saw many of my colleagues after the war, they never come to their senses because we all react differently on a stress. But absolutely, war is going to make you, it's going to break you and remake you into what? It's up to your decision. So that's the war.
It's a bit of a lottery, especially when a young individual is exposed to war that hadn't managed to build his character up, and you cannot know. Do you run into some people currently at present and just think, yeah, he could be a good warrior potentially? Do you have those thoughts sometimes when you meet in other people?
I say like my experience. I was never surrounded with alpha males.
Yeah.
I think all these alpha males are just they just love to be the tough and rough, right? In a war, I was always surrounded with normal people like myself, you.
Yeah, regular guys, right?
But one thing I learned, and I learned very quickly, very easily, because my part in the military was very, very different. I was started in Special Forces on Ministry Interior. I was 18 and a half years old. They could mold me, shape me in a way. And I have no family, no wife, no kids, and truly I saw my president, like if my president told me to jump on you, right, I would jump on you, right? That's how much I was into him. Then I moved into the presidential guard, and then I moved intelligence services, and list goes on. And eventually I end up my career in 96. And I was transferred from the defense to the foreign affairs in something what's called Directorate 7, which was foreign intelligence security services. And that's how I come in Australia as the head of the security intelligence services for Croatian government in Croatian embassy in Canberra. But you can't pinpoint on somebody, Bohdan, and say he's a good person, he's going to be that one. we are all created equally. We are all same under the skin. And as I say, I will always go, if you want to know how you're going to succeed in your life, or you need to ask yourself who you want to see in trenches next to you. And I'd rather see person like yourself, ordinary person, because people like this, I saw them, they will change. They will become the really, really the beasts, you know what I mean? Like how to say, like, you know, just they'll become the extraordinary, like, you know what I mean? In under
best
the courage
versions
under
of
the
themselves.
fire, yeah. The situation, awareness, and you know, combat and everything else. Particularly when you see you think that I saw the adults crying, and you think I will judge somebody because crying? No, I'll say like, listen, mate, I think it's time to check with the doctor and start to go home. You know what I mean? Because you can't look after some of the emotions under the fire, but you know that it's normal to somebody break. Then, on the other hand, some guys will see you suffering, they will do everything to shield you, protect you, go forward, and everything else. So, can I pinpoint the thing? I said somebody can be the best soldier or best fighter. No, but one thing I can tell you: that most of the loudest guys and biggest guys and strongest guys, they will never go any war. Never.
That's quite surprising to a lot of them, I bet, at least to them. What about dealing with post-traumatic syndromes? What was your experience? What would you say proved to be effective with your people, maybe with you personally? How do you go about afterwards procedure once the battle is over? How does society cure themselves? Because that's been a relevant question for Ukraine a lot of times, and a lot of people imagine that once this thing is over, when exactly is kind of irrelevant, but once it's over, we might have a rather traumatized society. So how do you go about, mitigating the outcomes of that?
Sometimes in 93, 94, I become immune on the funerals. But that stage, every single time somebody will die, I'll be upset, I'll be sad, all these things. But then something something unusual. People start dying not from combat fatigue or wounds.
Like taking their lives.
Yes. So first things first, I saw drinking is becoming like a good morning. You know what I mean?
And
alcohol galore, galore. People start drinking day and night. Domestic violence was exploding. And then people start becoming ill. Some people conceive the cancer very early because of the drinking and stress and everything else. Some of the guys will take their lives. And I've witnessed so many times people take a life in front of me. And, like every time I would just, part of me, somebody will just slice it, you know what I mean? I remember this guy, we were together in a bunker and, shelling started. We were joking like, and he took a gun and just killed himself, in front of like just out of the blue. That guy has so much to live for. Later on, we find out that he couldn't handle anymore, and we didn't know this. Once the war is finished,
prior to that, what he did, there was no indicator of something that he would do. Like, he didn't seem like that.
No. Yeah. I was, those stages there was no internet. There was, so it was a lot of letters, handwritten letters, and I don't remember many of my guys, particularly in reserve army. We get some reservists. They will get the letters from the wives who were in Germany, in Austria as a refugee, and they will find another man and goodbye. And they lost the touch with reality and everything else. So I think it is.
I bet the freaking infidelity must have been responsible for so many good men dying, so many good men taking their lives.
Because that's a war. Like this is something people don't see. You can see visible wounds of shelling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
I don't know which is harder, honestly.
And then the war finished. And when the war finished, you're becoming the problem for yourself. Like, look, the one thing I always say, and nobody can argue with me about this one. One thing I remember when I left the military, 30th of May 1998. the moment I left the army, there was my replacement was waiting, right? You know what I mean? So I was going in different department, so ministry, sorry, but still, when I left the military, I remember with my colleagues, I spoke with them. I was start getting messages. He died. He killed himself. He hanged himself. Cancer, 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 stroke, killing himself. And I said to myself, "What's happening? Like, what is this?" They lost the purpose. You know, I mean, they lost. The army doesn't have the solution for this. You know, the all
no
compartments are
programs,
there.
right?
Yeah, it's like there's. I truly believe that I was blessed enough. I was transferred. I knew it quite earlier. After 14 years, like I can't do this anymore. War is over a long time ago. I achieved my, what I achieved in the army, and I was being slowly out on different direction. But one thing I remember that after I left, a lot of people who were serving with me, they were slowly disappearing. You know what I mean? That's it due to the stress and some disease, cancer, whatever it is, heart attack. And I remember there was a joke, people always have some pills, with them. And it's like, what is this guy popping pills, And what they will do, Bogdan, they will sit in same coffee shop every day and they will regurgitating, repeating same things from the stories from the war over and over again. And it's a sad situation. It's a sad situation. So PTSD is very strong, and nobody likes to talk about this, particularly after war. I don't wish this to nobody because I saw what that does to the families, to the people, to the everybody.
As far as I can judge, having a goal, a purpose, post-deployment, post-battle seems to kind of smooth the problem out a little bit. So how does a soldier, in your opinion, preserve that goal once the active phase of the war is over? What would be, in your opinion, like the active key elements to still, should that goal be built by himself, or do you think it should be obviously somehow established by the government?
Look, I can't return, what was taken away from me, childhood and everything else. In one hand, I'm grateful for what's happened to me, and on one hand, I'm angry because, I saw the people my age, they're enjoying the life, they're studying and going to school, and I'm fighting war here, 200 kilometers from my capital city. I'm fighting the war. They are going to university there. Okay. But one thing I will share with everybody, nobody doesn't know better what you need to do with your life. No military, no government, nobody except yourself. You need to find yourself purpose. I truly believe when you establish the purpose of your existence, what do you want to achieve? What do you want to leave as your legacy? As the Japanese are doing this ikigai, the purpose of the presence in their world right now. For me, I didn't know what's going to pan my life. But that's like I was in diplomacy, and I decided it's like I should be my business owner, right? I know it sounds strange, but starting business in Australia with language which is not mine, and everything else was a challenge. But I wanted to push this, and then I said like to every guy and every woman in the military, war is a hell, hell is a war. It's necessity. It's happened for the reason. But war is going to end one way or another. Once when it's finished, you need to very quickly think about what you're going to do in the future. Right now, not when it's finished, but what day you need to think about what I'm going to do when the war is finished. Because the parade's going to end, lights going to turn off, music's going to stop, medals going to stop printing, people go back to the life. Politicians doing what they do, government do what it does, but you as an individual need to know how you're gonna do the best. And doesn't matter how much time I spend with some guys around me, I hold their hands and everything else. Most of them, they didn't want to live anymore. They lost the purpose. And I said, like, I want people find the purpose. Only that way it's going to help them to go to PTSD.
I've been thinking lately a lot about this. Now, again, it's obviously highly theoretical. And most of my times that I'm talking on the podcast, I'm talking out of my ass, so to say. But have you ever thought that perhaps being out in the civil is like it in some respects is even maybe, I don't want to sound diminishing, disrespectful to the guys at war, but don't you think that sometimes being out in the civil is kind of easier, or rather is kind of harder, because of when you have a regular life as a man, it appears that you have this multitude of different ways to choose, decisions to make, mistakes to make. And it sometimes might be a little bit overwhelming to certain individuals, this whole litany of different decisions and options and probabilities. Whereas while you are serving, there is a precise goal, whether that goal seems achievable or potentially killing, deadly, but at least you precisely know what exactly must be done. And don't you think it might be one of the reasons why a lot of people can't find themselves post-war and they cannot get used to normal life, because this overwhelming ways that they find themselves, it's just too much for them, right? Have you thought about that?
I wondered once upon a time I was sitting in some commissions in military, right, when they accepted new candidates in different roles, and that's how I met my first wife. Actually, she's a doctor, and I asked her, so like, why are we getting all these healthy young men in military between 18 to 22? And she answered to me simple. She says to me, because they can absorb so much, they can get so much, because we don't know what the war is gonna do it, or the army life in the army in a peaceful time. It's awesome. You're really doing a lot of good things, and particularly working for society, and the list goes on. But one thing I know, that you go into the war healthy, let's go say 18, 19, 20 years old, and you come back damaged. No question. Nobody can argue with this one. Doesn't matter what your role you are, on the front line or the back, as long as you're in touch with some of the combat, in some engagement with the enemy, except the generals. Generals, they're carrying the brunt, of the decisions. But after all, they're not combatants. When you see everybody above major and up, they're all at the back. They're always shield from the front line. What's it calling? Combat experience. And on your question, I never understood why military doesn't have so much research. What's happened to somebody when the war is finished? I can't. That's always question. Why we go into war healthy, we come back unhealthy, and it seems to me that nobody doesn't want to know about this, particularly army. Because then there is nothing appealing. Imagine if you say to somebody, you're going to war, but when you come back, you're going to be
it doesn't
damaged,
sell, so to speak.
Psychologically damaged. You need to be wounds. Look, I have the wounds in my body, they heal, but here, and I remember, I had a very, very bad dreams for many, many years. I wake up middle of the night and I couldn't talk properly, right?
Wow.
And I was screaming. I remember with my ex-wife, screaming in bed, and she'll try to calm me down, because the war is not just about killing somebody, but witnessing the horrors of the war. Right? War is living under constant fear that you're gonna end up your life. What's most precious? It's your life, and that is what the people are actually experiencing, that fear. So, on your question, only one thing I can say, that everybody can expecting, if they go in the war, they're going to come back damaged somehow. There's no long-term solution or also research to say how people should behave when they come out of the war, or whatever it is. And most of the people who come back out of the war, they come back damaged somehow.
Did you see some guys applying to the army as a way of escaping the current reality somehow?
Well, army is a good to get you into the fight, but as well, army has a mechanism to say like, listen, this person doesn't deserve to be in the army, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look, we did have a lot of the my unit. I'll tell you something else. In my unit, I explain this in my book, consisted at first from people from the prison with the light sentences, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there was no manpower. There was no manpower. So there's a lot of people has been, like I remember correctly, President he's declared abolition, right? You know what I mean, for the everybody who wants to fight. You know what I mean, not the murderers or rapists. You know what I mean, but if you steal the money or chocolates or whatever it is, you know what I mean, just come out and fight. You know what I mean, and no, many was actually took the weapon. No, no, really. Because people are afraid, as I say to you.
What a story, though, right? You've accidentally, out of stupidity, taken some chocolate bar, and next thing you know, you're serving with a rifle in the hand.
Yeah,
right?
like,
I don't think that the bar was
the figure of speech. You know, people are stealing, like, you know what I mean. You know, communism theft was being punished very badly, right? You know what I mean, like literally 5-6 years. You know what I mean, something ridiculous. So these people have been in prison maybe just before the war broke out. You know what I mean, and suddenly you get abolition, but not many took the weapons. No, really. And I mean, that's but that some people are going to war to hide themselves. Yes, they did. Yes, of course.
Switching up the topic a little bit, no less perhaps
Yes.
heavy, dramatic in some ways. Do you believe that the one and only paragon, an example to follow for a man, must be his father?
So it's again.
Do you believe that the one and only example for a man to follow must exclusively be his father and nobody else? That's what I've been hearing a lot, and I wonder. No, you don't.
Nah, not at all. My father was the biggest pussycat in the world. Biggest, you know, I mean, how to say? He was my father. You know, what I mean, I cannot deny this. But my father, like, I follow my grandfather. Let's go say my grandfather was that one who didn't speak much, but I knew he loved me, and you know, he was the one who was being that my role model for my life. So no, the father, it doesn't need to be that one. No.
Yeah, my father was definitely probably the hardest person to be used as a role model. And I've been hearing this opinion online quite often that, oh yeah, the only person you got to look up to is your father. The only competition you must embark on is between you and your father. I was like, bitch, I'm already better than that guy. You know, when he was 26, I'm 26 right now. And I was wondering whether that somehow silently passively intoxicates my life. I thought having your father as an anti-example, if that spoils your life somehow.
You are the man on your own self, and nobody has a right to tell you what is right for you, what is not right for you, what you should do or not you should do. If I know today it's my birthday, today it's my 51st birthday.
Hold on a minute. I don't know if you can hear me.
I was sitting on a beach this morning, and I think to myself, I wish sometimes that I didn't take some steps in my life. You know, my life will be different. You know what I mean? And I remember my father, before he passed away, a few hours, he told me, I wish I didn't done this. I wish I didn't done this. I wish I didn't done this. And I said to him, well, now it's too late, dude. You know what I mean? Now you're going to die anyway. He says like, yeah, no, he was laughing. He said, I know I'm going to die, but I just want to tell you, don't waste your life on a dogma to follow somebody else's opinion. You know, if you follow somebody else's opinion and you fell under somebody else's dogma or their influence, you're not your person anymore. So who cares? Who cares? You know what I mean? You're living your life, Bogdan. You're a good man for yourself. You know your values. You owe nobody apology. That's what the people always coming back to me. It's like, I wish. Well, I wish as well. You know, my son was diagnosed with epilepsy at age 9. And part of my life died straight away. You know what I mean? I don't know why this happened, but it did. And I said to him, I'll fight with you. You know, you're going to be better. You're going to be better. Eventually, a few years ago, my son has a brain surgery. They remove him the good portion of the brain. He's now clear of epilepsy and everything else. But I know how he's being judged by everybody. And his friends always told him, it's easy for your dad. And I said, like, don't worry for me. I'm your father. I love you. But you have your life. Don't worry for they say that it's easier for you because I'm your dad. You are your own man. You fight for this. You are this one. Same with you, Bogdan. Who cares what the world thinks? Fine, man. Just you want to fight? Go fight, man. You want to? Don't worry, Zod, man. Don't. This is me. This is my podcast. I'm enjoying my life. I hope nobody apology. But you know what? After all, seriously, I'm looking people that Tony Robbins was here, right? In Sydney. And the cheapest tickets was $1,000. Think about this one, Bogdan. If I have 20,000 people in one room, Bogdan, Mario, different ages of groups, different education, different backgrounds, different literacy, everything else. And there comes Tony Robbins and said like, yeah, guys, you are great. I was, we jump on them. Tony Robbins changed my life. Everybody, 2 hours later, yeah, he's great. 3 days later, nobody remembers him. You know why? Because it's a hype. You can't train equally people on different ages group, different education, everything else. That's what I say to you. What I say to you. You want to be you educate yourself. You are that one who knows what's the best for you. Nobody can tell you what's good for you because it's good for me, or good for my son, or good for this midget, or unicorn, or whatever it is. Let the Russians enjoy their, Bosch, you enjoy the McDonald's, brother. That's what it is. Life is going on. That's it.
What is next big step for you?
I want to be the podcaster #1 in Australia. Look, I just finished my master's, which is another thing I achieved in my life, and I was told will never in Australia succeed in some levels, which is I wrote a couple of books, as you know, and I have my businesses. But last year I started my podcast, Life the Battlefield, exactly what you're doing right now. I love talking to people who have their story from victim to victor, and people who make the different and positive, impactful changes in the life of others with their decisions. World is not reserved for the few to share their knowledge. I think the internet, it is a great thing to share. So my next step, it is to make Life the Battlefield one of the positive tools for many. I'm interviewing people like yourself, and I can't wait to be my guest.
Oh yeah, with pleasure.
Yeah, and that's my next step, to acquire more guests with their stories traversing from victim to victor, and their knowledge, experience to be shared with a wider audience, so everybody can benefit from this.
What podcast do you perhaps listen?
Sorry?
What podcast do you maybe listen? Do you have any podcast that you are a regular listener of?
Listen, your ones, like I just listened last 2-3 interviews with your guests, and I really enjoyed, actually. Like I must say, with this guy with the beard and the hat, I forgot the name. I forgot the name. I should write down. I was like, oh yeah, that's his name. I forgot the name, but I enjoyed that one. Look, there's no particular podcasters. Like, one thing I want you to give yourself credit. Currently on this planet, 3.5 million podcasters are registered. 3.5 million. Only 600,000 podcasts are active, like yourself, because everybody gave up after episode 5. Today, we have the Russell Brand. I'm not sure, did you heard? The guy, 6.5 million people follow him. He's been accused of sexual harassment, rape, and everything else. Yeah. All these people. You know who's making change? You, Bogdan. You. That's a podcast I'm going to discover.
It's interesting because I used to be blind fan of podcasts. There wouldn't be one day that I wouldn't talk of him and her and that and this podcast. And then when years have passed, I was like, honestly, that guy ain't that funny. Honestly, that guy has become too predictable. I used to be big into Joe Rogan, and I would listen to him. And then I was like, you start noticing that, evidently people are fallible. Nobody is infallible. So it's like, my problem, it's not really a problem. It's just a little bit of food for my mind, so to speak. I think there are so many podcasts, and there are so many worthless, so many useless podcasts. And then I'm asking myself a question, well, do I really want to be one of them? Do I really want to be another podcast, no name, that nobody's heard of? But then I think, well, listen, if Rogan 10 years ago had told himself the same thing, he wouldn't have been who he is right now, or anybody else. So it's like, you've got to believe what benefits you. Whatever strategy you know is beneficial, just bullshit yourself into that and stick to the plan. That's it. So